The paper trail. Let's go, 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 go. Yeah, 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 yeah. For the love of money, niggas come around. For the love of money, some stay around. For the love of money, what a nigga will do. For the love of the money, yeah. I gotta shake it, 12 at night to 5 in the morning. They don't give a fuck now. If it's for the money, niggas gon' bark and they bite like a motherfucking dog. Gotta party like a motherfucking dog. For that cat, I am gon' roof and I'm barking at that cat, and I am gon' take the roof off when I'm riding that ride. Rip, leaning to the left, but I'm steady on the only right. I'm swerving with a purpose, with a purpose. A nigga been sipping on that purple. A nigga been cheaping on that purple. Cause I'm getting money, I'm getting money. Cause I'm getting money. And I'm laughing all the way to the motherfucking bank. And I'm telling her, tell me later if she thinking what I'm thinking. Damn, I'm getting money. I walk about the bank and I stuck up in the wheel. Headed to my next big just.
LED Live.
What's up, family? Donald Trump, your president, is shaking in his boots. There are reports that Iran hackers have files of Donald Trump from the EPSTEIN files. I mean, they got video images of Trump doing strange things with youngsters. Yeah, fam, that's the claim. He's doing some strange stuff with little girls. Give me a thumbs up if you believe it, fam. Thumbs up. Thumbs down if you say, nah, man, we don't even know them people, man. We wouldn't trust them people. We don't even know them. Why would we trust what they're saying? I'll give you a few moments to think about it. Okay, time's up. Family, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the truth is, but Iran is saying that if Trump don't back off, this is according to reports, if Trump does not back off of this so-called invasion and attack of Iran, they're going to release those files. I say, why not release them anyway? I mean, just on the strength of integrity, why not release the files if you are a country worthy of respect? If you really stand for something, why not just release them anyway? Because right now it sounds like to me that everybody's playing the blackmail game. You know, like, yo, we're going to protect these people as long as we can get something out of it. So, you know, you got these US-Iran tensions, and they're at a fever pitch. Trump has consistently threatened to invade Iran. He's consistently threatened to bomb Iran. And Iran has said consistently that if you do that to us, if you invade us, we will strike. They said. They said, we won't miss this time. Implying that they tried to get them before. Yeah, they say, yeah, if you come over here with that, you try that, what you did in Venezuela, we are going to come for you. We're going to target you. We are going to get you. We're going to hit you, Trump, and we're not going to miss this time. So the question is Trump going to on the challenge? Will he accept the challenge? Will he accept the challenge? Or will he fall back and save his own skin? I don't know if Trump is willing to go there. Trump is a classic bully. And bullies do not like formidable opponents. Like some people like formidable opponents because it brings out the best in them, right? You want to fight the best. Like when I was boxing, I wanted to fight the best. Whoever the best was, when I won the Golden Gloves, I fought the best in Texas. I fought the best. We're talking Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Beaumont, Corpus Christi, Austin. I fought the best. I had to go through everybody to win. So you want to fight the best because otherwise you don't really believe it. You can say you're the best, but you don't really believe it if you ain't really went up against the best. You got to compete against the best. And I do not think that, I'm not saying that Iran is the best, but they're not afraid. And bullies don't like dealing with people who are not afraid. Bullies are energized by fear. Yeah, they're mobilized by fear. You saw how, Trump and his administration, his top dogs were talking over the past several weeks about how, we got the strongest military and it's about strongest, and we don't have to negotiate who's going to stop us and all that type of stuff. That's how bullies talk. That's how bullies behave. Now, what I want to know is Iran purport to be this integrity-driven country, standing on principle. Okay, if you got the files, release the files, no matter what. Perhaps if you release the files, that might be enough to trigger a different response. That might be enough to get people to stand up in the U.S. and pretty much remove him from the power and the ability to attack. I say play offense, not defense. I believe in playing offense, not defense. Once I understand I got an opponent in front of me, I'm not waiting on them to find me. I'm going to look for them. I'm not sitting back like a sitting duck and just waiting. I'm not doing that. Unless, of course, it's part of the strategy. That could be a good strategy. Ambush. Make them think they got you. Make them think they got you. Make them come waltzing up on it and ding, 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 out. Lights out, just like that. But I'm saying, do it. If you got the files, do it. I triple dare you to release them. I triple dare you. These dudes are getting blackmailed every which way. This is why you don't play these type of games. This is why you don't put yourself in these type of situations. You don't, even just on a lower scale, you don't put yourself in a situation where a person can blackmail you. You don't put yourself in a situation where somebody can use something that's embarrassing to you or incriminating to you, and they got that holding that over your head. You don't want to ever give somebody that type of power because you're forever indebted to that person. That's a bad, bad position to be in. I want to hear what Iran has to say. I want to see those files. The American public demands to see those files. By show of hand, who wants to see the files? Who wants to see the files? I want to see the files, man. I want to see. I want those files redacted. I need to see for a fact, yep, that's him. But you know what's going to happen. If those files are ever released, if anything is ever released, all he's going to say is somebody doctored on him. That's all he's going to say. He's going to say somebody tampered with the files and those files are not authentic. That's what they're going to say because they got an excuse for everything. The last thing that Trump is going to say ever is, my bad, I was wrong, please forgive me, I apologize. He ain't never apologized since we've known him in the public eye. I've never seen him apologize ever. I guess that's part of his business model. Like, never apologize. He never, ever apologize. He do a lot of complaining. And get mad when other people complain about his policies or lack thereof. So now Trump is sitting back trying to figure out how do we hack the hackers? I think that it's a possibility. I'm not sure if they got something on them, but it's a possibility. Anything's possible. It's a possibility that they do have something on them. I think it's an even stronger possibility that Russia, Putin, has something on Trump. And this is why he constantly swings from Putin's disco balls. I think Putin got something on Trump. This is why Trump will not show any aggression towards Russia. I don't think that they understand. Just release the files. And you don't have to worry about that. Just release the files, man. They're gonna ask Trump about those files tomorrow. They're gonna ask him about the files today. They're gonna ask Trump about those files, and Trump will say, "Who? Iran? The Iranian people are nice people. I love them. They're friends to America, and that's it. Yeah, we've had some disagreements, but we worked through them, and that's just what powerful people do." We don't want to talk about that. The files, we don't want to talk about that. Epstein, we've moved on from that. We don't want to talk about that. Let's just move on. You know what? You're a stupid person. You ask the worst questions. You're the worst interviewer ever. Who do you work for? Oh, ABC. Okay. Yeah, they need to fire you. In fact, ABC should be fired. I may just revoke your press pass. That boy hate answering questions. And let me tell you, all you journalists out there, if you was a real journalist, if you ask him a question and it's a valid question, you should ask that question until he answers the question. And if you decide to fall back, the next journalist should ask the same question until you get an answer. But that's too much like right. Anyway, fam, we'll say you drop a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. No more talk.
Israel and actively leading Israel following a wave of false reports, claiming online, alleged that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps carried out a missile strike targeting the Prime Minister's office. No credible evidence has supported that claim. The reports surfaced at a moment of heightened military confrontation between Israel and Iran, with the United States also engaged in operations against Tehran. In such periods of intense conflict, unverified information often spreads quickly. The suggestion that Israel's Prime Minister had been killed gained traction across social media platforms before being challenged by international news organizations. Multiple outlets reported that there was no confirmation from Israeli authorities or independent observers to substantiate the assassination claims. The absence of official statements, combined with Netanyahu's continued public engagement, raised immediate doubts about the narrative. On March 2nd, 2026, Netanyahu publicly stated that Israel's strikes on Iran would increase in the coming days. His remarks, carried by several international broadcasters, underscored that he remains in office and is directing Israel's military response. There has been no indication from Israeli officials of any disruption in leadership. The false reports emerged against the backdrop of an expanding regional conflict. The fighting has included US-Israeli strikes inside Iran and retaliatory missile launches targeting Israel and regional energy infrastructure. The conflict has also resulted in significant casualties, including the death of Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in a joint strike, as well as US military fatalities. Analysts note that disinformation frequently accompanies armed conflict, particularly when tensions are high and information is limited. Claims involving senior political leaders can quickly shape perceptions, even when unsupported by evidence. In this case, the rapid debunking by established news organizations helped contain the spread of the story. Netanyahu's continued public presence and statements leave little room for ambiguity. Israeli government functions appear to be operating without interruption, and military coordination with allies remains ongoing. The episode highlights the challenges of verifying information during wartime and the speed at which unconfirmed claims can travel. For now, officials and international media are aligned on a central fact. Israel's prime minister is alive and continuing to lead his country through an escalating regional conflict.
Iran appointed a new interim supreme leader, Arafi, but now reports suggest Israel may have eliminated him too. While Iran hasn't officially confirmed this yet, the pattern looks similar to previous targeted leadership strikes. Israel appears to be following a clear decapitation strategy, targeting top leadership to disrupt Iran's military and political coordination. Meanwhile, Iran has gone all out. Reports from Kuwait show heavy smoke near the US embassy, and viral footage claims a US F-15 fighter jet was shot down. If confirmed, this would be historic, because the F-15 has long been considered nearly undefeated in air combat. But it doesn't stop there. Iran has reportedly launched strikes on French and British bases in the Middle East, including a French naval base near Abu Dhabi and the UK's Royal Air Force Base in Cyprus. The UK has already started evacuating its citizens from the region. This conflict is no longer just Iran versus Israel. The US Western allies are now directly involved, and the war could expand further in the coming weeks.
Did you know this?
Iranian here with another pro tip for anyone who's not from the Middle East. To return, there are 3 facts that you just have to accept. Number 1, secular westernizing nation. Number 2, the 1979 Islamic Revolution was not an organic movement. It was orchestrated by communists and Islamists, and it was funded and supported by Western nations. And number 3, the Shah of Iran was not a dictator. The Shah of Iran was protecting Iranians from Islamists and communists. Unfortunately, everyone in the West has just dealt with the historical revisionism that's been put out there by communists and Islamists to justify taking over Iran in 1979 and turn it into an Islamic hellhole governed by Sharia law. So if you're wondering why Iranians are taking to the streets and protesting against Islam, wanting to overthrow the Islamic Republic, and calling for the return of the Shah, the current king in exile, His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, that's because everything the Western media, communists, leftists, and Islamists have told you is a lie.
So not only did Trump's capture of Venezuelan President Maduro likely violate US law, it also broke international law. Under the UN Charter, no country is allowed to use force against another unless it's self-defense or the UN Security Council approves, and neither of those apply here. Trump's pointing to Maduro's US drug trafficking charges as justification, saying he's responsible for drugs coming in that are killing Americans. But for one, Venezuela is actually not a major producer of cocaine. Most of the coke in America comes from Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia. And 2, criminal charges still don't give the US the right to invade another country and seize its president. Under international law, arrests like this require extradition or international cooperation, not military force. And world leaders are condemning Trump's actions. France said it violates the principle of not resorting to force. Germany said international law has to be respected. And South Africa even called on the UN Security Council to urgently convene to address the situation. Newsgirls will be reporting on this story every step of the way, so follow to stay in the loop.
Watch your boy. Watch your boy. They on him, dropping him. Okay, I'm missing. That's cool. That's cool. Maneuver. Weave. 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 Yeah. Hit him with the spinneroni. Yeah, we going up, drop. Ah, we missed him. We missed him. They coming. They coming. I got something for you, though. I got something for you. You close. You close. Blah. Fuck y'all talking about? Stop playing with US. Stop playing with us. Whoever that fucking pilot is, he need a raise. He need the biggest badge of honor, and he need to be paid for the rest of his life. Because that maneuvering skill that he just did right there, impeccable. I salute you, sir. Salute. Who is this man?
Why is the U.S. going to war with Iran? In 1951, Iran's parliament voted to nationalize the country's oil, which had been under the control of the British Empire for the past 50 years. This enraged British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who convinced U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower to overthrow the country's government. On August 19, 1953, the CIA overthrew the democratically elected prime minister and gave absolute power to the monarch Mohammad Reza Shah. The Shah immediately gave the U.S. and UK control of the country's oil and would rule as dictator for the next 26 years. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution saw the Shah removed from power, and Western oil companies were forced to leave the country. In an attempt to exploit Iran's weakened military, Saddam Hussein's Iraq invaded Iran on September 22, 1980. The Reagan administration provided Saddam with billions in economic aid and military weapons. These weapons included poisonous chemicals and deadly biological viruses such as anthrax and bubonic plague. In 1988, the U.S. became involved in the war directly, destroying half of Iran's navy and shooting down an Iranian commercial flight, killing 290 people on board. In total, Saddam had killed over 600,000 Iranians, as well as 200,000 Iraqi Kurds. After the war, the U.S. greatly expanded existing sanctions, banning all trade with both American and foreign companies. This has had a devastating effect on Iran's economy and prevents the country from accessing key food imports, as well as many life-saving medicines. On June 22, 2025, despite Trump's own director of national intelligence claiming that U.S. intel does not believe Iran is building a nuclear weapon, the U.S. Air Force struck 3 Iranian nuclear sites, and as of February 2026, the U.S. is preparing to strike again. Widespread protests, caused by the U.S. blockade, are destabilizing the country, and the Trump administration is looking to deal a final blow.
Oil headed to $200. Middle East war about to crush your wallet. Iran, US, Israel fighting could shut the Strait of Hormuz, trapping 20% of global oil overnight. Prices already rocketing. Experts warn $100 plus soon. $200 in worst case chaos. Gas prices exploding, inflation surging, recession crashing in. Your everyday costs about to skyrocket. Tiny conflict, or the spark for worldwide economic disaster. Iran just wiped out $1.1 billion radar in Qatar. America's missile shield shattered. Police Scarlight Iran's IRGC claims massive missile strike destroyed the super advanced and /FPS. 132 radar in Qatar. $1.1 billion system that tracks threats 5,000 kilometers away. Smack next to Al Udeid base. This gets U.S. Gulf defenses. If real, Iran landed a devastating blow. Game totally flipped. China just helped Iran stop Mach 4. China secretly boosted Iran's defenses to smash incoming Mach 4 missiles mid-flight. Furious, U.S. and Israel hit back hard. Trump declares major combat, demands Iran surrender now. Israel's massive preemptive strikes pound targets. Nuclear fears exploding everywhere. Gulf on fire. Is this the final trigger for all-out regional war?
Drone strikes British RAF base in Cyprus. Iran's revenge its NATO soil. A mystery drone slammed into Britain's key RAF Akrotiri base in Cyprus, sparking explosions and limited damage. No casualties reported. Cyprus officials confirm unmanned drone attack. UK Ministry of Defense staying tight-lipped, with Iran-Israel tensions exploding. Is this Tehran's bold new strike on Western turf? NATO's southern flank just got real scary. Iran's drone swarm just annihilated U.S. weapons depot in Erbil. Revenge militia launched a massive drone swarm straight at the U.S. base and weapons depot at Erbil Airport, Iraq. Pure payback for Khamenei's death in U.S. Israel strikes. Explosions shaking the city. Thick smoke everywhere. Defenses scrambling to intercept. Most stopped. But if even one got through, America's arsenal just took a brutal hit. Escalation exploding. Next wave coming. Iran targets U.S. base in Erbil with missile strike. Chaos in northern where U.S. forces are stationed. Iranian missile attack reportedly hit the American base. Major escalation unfolding right now. US F-15 bursts into flames over Kuwait. Shocking midair explosion caught on video. A U.S. Air Force F-15 fighter jet just exploded midair above Kuwait in terrifying footage going viral right now. Flames everywhere before it plummets. Pilot ejected safely and is confirmed okay, but the cause remains a total mystery. No reports of ground hits or injuries yet. Another American warplane down. Accident or something worse.
I gotta admit, with all the stuff going on, I almost missed this story, but apparently on the 1st of March of 2026, hundreds of pro-Iranian demonstrators swarmed outside of the U.S. consulate in Karachi, Pakistan. Apparently, the protests escalated into violence as rioters breached the outer security perimeter. They climbed over the main gate, entered the driveway or premises, smashed windows, and committed just widespread acts of vandalism. Some protesters attempted to force their way deeper into the building and set parts of it on fire, apparently, with social media videos showing individuals igniting blazes while chanting anti-U.S. and anti-Israel slogans. Local Pakistani security forces, including police and paramilitary personnel, responded by deploying tear gas, batons, and aerial firing to disperse the crowd and regain control of the area. Apparently, clashes persisted for hours, with protesters pelting stones and security forces blocking roads, using containers to contain the unrest. Some reports indicate that gunfire was used, resulting in casualties, although the estimates for that varied, with at least 9 to 22 protesters killed and 30 to 120 injured. Now, I've seen some reports saying that the U.S. Marine Embassy staff, typically responsible for inner perimeter defense, opened fire on protesters who breached the inner security zone, with allegations of them actually hitting some of the protesters. However, local Pakistani news outlets and officials like those from Dawn and The Hindu attribute the gunfire primarily from the Pakistani police and deny any suggestions that U.S. Marines were involved in any of the shootings. So far, there's been no official statement from the U.S. State Department or embassy confirming whether or not Marines were involved in the engagement or not. And all of the mainstream media reports on it make no mention of it at all, and instead they focus on the Pakistani security's role.
Iran just posted a mysterious countdown timer on X. There's many people wondering, what does this mean? Then it shows Netanyahu from behind with his voice, and then bang. It ends on a "We are present everywhere" 120. So what can this mean? I mean, should we be worried about this?
Oh, hell. So it says when you escape the Epstein files, but those files haven't dropped yet. Oh, hell. Y'all like the video. Let me know what you think in the comments.
We're now 10 days into this revolt, but it smells kind of different this time. As we speak, pictures of Khamenei are burning in the streets of Tehran. Across the world, Venezuelans are celebrating what they pray will be the downfall of the dictatorship that robbed their country of its future. These events and the next few weeks are going to drastically change the world as we know it. The Middle East is never going to be the same. And if you're wondering how Maduro, the leader of a drug cartel in Venezuela, is connected to us here in the Middle East, you don't need to wait long to find out. This is a story of drugs and oil and evil, and it's all coming to a head right now. As always, to get to the root of the story, one must follow the money of Venezuela, where it has arrived to now. They're also cozying up with Iran. In the early 2000s, both countries were main suppliers of oil and are hoping to stay that way. To do so, they devise a plan to drive up the prices of oil and quickly become economic partners. They have a lot more in common than just oil and money. They both share an enemy, and they devise a plan to work together to defeat imperialism, otherwise known as America. And their drug relationship starts as well. You see, both these countries have issues with oil production, and they're looking for other ways to make money. Lots of it. Venezuela has the means to produce huge amounts of drugs, but struggles to distribute them across Africa and the Middle East. Here too, Iran, i.e. the Islamic Republic, benefits. You see, Hezbollah The terrorist organization based in Lebanon is most famous for firing rockets at Israel, but in truth, it is actually the biggest drug cartel in the Middle East. With Iran being responsible for so much of the terror in the Middle East, they have been sanctioned badly. To try and avoid the price of those sanctions, Iran decides to make itself completely self-sufficient. But there's a flaw in their plan. They don't have a lot of water, and growing crops demands lots of it. Saying they aren't friends with Israel, we have all the technology they would need. Instead, they tried to bypass sanctions using a shadow fleet. These are hundreds of rusted, uninsured oil tankers that turn off their GPS trackers to sail like ghosts through the ocean, smuggling oil to China and Venezuela. Iran uses Venezuela as a smuggling port. And now, with the US coming in and taking out Maduro, it effectively sinks Iran's ability to maneuver things across the world and get their oil out there. Without Venezuela as a safe harbor, Iran's smuggling route is dead in the water. Very quickly, the Islamic Republic's obsession with destroying Israel and focusing its resources on fighting led to the country falling into complete disarray and the economy tanking. In 1979, the Iranian rial was at 70 to the dollar. Today, it's over $1 million. The inflation is crazy. And surprise, surprise, the Iranians don't like it. It smells kind of different this time.
गंजर हो गया यार
Many people get confused between the UAE, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, but it's actually simple. The United Arab Emirates, or UAE, is a country, just like India or China. It's located in the Middle East and covers about 83,000 square kilometers. But here's the key part. The UAE is made up of 7 regions called emirates, similar to states. Each emirate is ruled by a sheikh, and together, the 7 rulers govern the country. Now, Dubai is one of those 7 emirates, and inside it, there's also a city called Dubai. Yes, same name. That's why people get confused. Dubai is famous for skyscrapers, luxury, tourism, and business. But it is not a country. Abu Dhabi is another emirate, and it's the largest one. It's also the capital of the UAE, where the president and government offices are located. So remember this, UAE is the country. Dubai is an emirate and a city. Abu Dhabi is the largest emirate and the capital.
3 U.S. F-15E Strike Eagle fighter jets were shot down over Kuwait in what military officials have described as an unintended friendly fire incident during a heated regional conflict. The jets were flying in support of ongoing operations linked to attacks from Iranian aircraft, drones, and ballistic missiles. At the same time, Kuwaiti air defense systems were actively engaging hostile aerial threats to protect national airspace. Amid the fast-moving and confused battle conditions, those systems misidentified the U.S. fighters as hostile and launched defensive fire that brought all 3 aircraft down. Each of the 6 aircrew members aboard the jets successfully ejected and parachuted to safety. They were recovered quickly and are reported to be in stable condition. Kuwaiti authorities acknowledged the error and are cooperating with U.S. forces as an investigation begins to determine exactly how the misidentification occurred. The incident highlights how quickly risk can escalate when multiple countries' forces operate in the same crowded combat zone, especially under the pressure of active missile and drone fire.
What is the United States trying to do right now? Well, the U.S. is a sovereign, trying to shift its economy from financialization to industrialization. The U.S. wants to build things again, and not necessarily just export dollars. So tariffs are a tool of national power. And from a financial industrial complex point of view, tariffs are volatility, which is expressed in the stock market going up and down, right? Volatility is a fancy way of saying it's an opportunity to make money if you have the information.
Tens of thousands of Americans are stranded in the Middle East as Iran launches strikes against U.S. allies. A friend who's in Dubai right now actually just sent this to me as she was walking outside. The strikes have led to chaos at airports and thousands of canceled flights. In fact, we haven't seen this many flight cancellations since the beginning of the pandemic. In fact, Iran even targeted some airports, like this is the Dubai airport. And this is crazy. So this map shows where Iran has launched retaliatory strikes, and it's so many U.S. allies. So look at the red dots: Oman, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, obviously Israel. And take this in because it looks eerily similar to this screenshot that I just took from FlightAware that shows all of the flights in the air right now. And you can see there's this huge gap around where the strikes are taking place. The only difference is the UAE, because Etihad and Emirates just resumed a limited amount of flights from Dubai and Abu Dhabi to evacuate people. But it's far from enough because, of course, Americans aren't the only ones stranded in the Middle East. There's hundreds of thousands of tourists from around the world that are trying to get home. Germany said they're sending planes to Oman and Saudi Arabia to evacuate the 30,000 German tourists. The Czech Republic said they're also sending planes. But even though the US got us into this conflict, they've yet to say how they will be evacuating stranded Americans. Newsgirls will be tracking any updates about Iran, so follow to stay in the loop.
Something happened today at a podium in Beijing that the entire world needed to stop and listen to. China's foreign ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning stood before reporters this morning and delivered a statement that carries weight far beyond its diplomatic language. She said, and these are the official words of the government of the People's Republic of China, the second most powerful nation on earth, a permanent member of the UN Security Council. The most urgent task is an immediate cessation of military operations and preventing a spread and spillover of conflict. She then confirmed that one Chinese national had already been killed in crossfire in Tehran, that more than 300 Chinese citizens had been evacuated from Iran, that China's embassy in Israel had issued nationals to evacuate immediately, either to safer areas inside Israel or to leave through Egypt via the Taba border crossing, and that China was ready to work with the international community at the UN, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and every other available platform to, in her words, speak up for justice. When a country that has 1.4 billion people, the world's second largest military, veto power at the Security Council, and a 25-year strategic partnership with Iran is using the phrase, speak up for justice, that is not a diplomatic statement. That is a warning. And today, on day 3 of the Iran-Israel-America war, that warning is sitting at the center of a conflict that is now threatening to pull the entire international order apart. Let's walk through everything. How we got here, what China's ceasefire call actually means in practice, what is happening on the ground right now, and most importantly, where this is all going next. The strikes that triggered China's intervention began at 2:30 in the morning Eastern Time on February 28, 2026, when Donald Trump posted an 8-minute video on Truth Social announcing that Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated U.S.-Israel military campaign, had begun against Iran. This was not a targeted hit on a single nuclear facility. This was a comprehensive, multi-layered assault across 24 of Iran's 31 provinces within the first 24 hours. B-2 stealth bombers, B-1 strategic bombers, Israeli Air Force munitions, over 1,200 strikes in the first day alone. Targets included Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile infrastructure, its air defense systems, its naval command, the IRGC's entire command structure, Iranian state television, hospitals, Azadi Stadium, Milad Tower, and, most consequentially, the personal compound and office of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei himself. By the morning of March 1st, Iranian state television confirmed what the world had been dreading. Khamenei was dead. The man who had ruled the Islamic Republic for 36 years, killed in a strike that Trump later said hit him during a breakfast meeting with aides. Trump's description was chilling. He said Khamenei believed he was safe because the meeting was in broad daylight. He was not safe. China's first official reaction came within hours of the strike's beginning. On Saturday, February 28th, the Foreign Ministry spokesperson issued a statement calling the strikes a matter of deep concern and demanding an immediate ceasefire. China said Iran's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity must be respected. China's state news agency, Xinhua, went further, calling Washington's use of military force a flagrant violation of the UN Charter and a departure from fundamental norms of international relations. Then on Sunday, March 1st, after Khamenei's death was confirmed, China escalated its language dramatically. Foreign Minister Wang Yi got on the phone with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and told him it was unacceptable for the US and Israel to launch attacks against Iran, still less to blatantly assassinate a leader of a sovereign country. Wang called for an immediate ceasefire and the earliest possible return to dialogue and negotiation. China then called an emergency UN Security Council session with Russia's support to discuss the crisis. That session happened on Sunday. The United States has veto power on the Security Council. Nothing binding came out of it. But China showed up, China spoke, and China made sure the entire world saw it doing both. Then this morning, March 2nd, day 3, Mao Ning appeared at the regular foreign ministry press briefing in Beijing, and China went even further. A reporter from Iran's state broadcaster directly asked China whether Beijing and Moscow had discussed providing military support to Iran if Iran requested it. Mao Ning did not say no. She redirected to the official readout of the Wang Yi-Lavrov phone call and said she had no more information to add. That non-denial in a moment like this is being read very carefully by intelligence services across the Western world. A reporter from Anadolu Agency asked the same question: China and Russia, military support for Iran, yes or no, and received the same answer. Separately, China confirmed it was evacuating 3,000 of its nationals from Iran through 4 land routes to Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, and Iraq. China is getting its own people out. That is not the behavior of a country that is merely concerned. That is the behavior of a country preparing for a much longer and much worse conflict. Now let's look at what China's ceasefire call is actually running up against on the ground. Because the reality in the Middle East right now makes any ceasefire look almost impossible to achieve in the near term. Iran's retaliatory strikes are now confirmed to have hit 9 countries simultaneously. Israel took ballistic missile strikes, killing at least 10 people, including 6 in a single attack on a residential building in Beit Shemesh. Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest airports on Earth, was struck and damaged. Qatar's LNG energy sites were hit, sending immediate shockwaves into global energy markets. Kuwait International Airport was struck. The U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain was targeted. Explosions rocked Abu Dhabi, Manama, and Muscat. Jordan's armed forces intercepted 49 drones and ballistic missiles. An oil tanker was struck off the Omani coast, killing at least 1 crew member. A UK Royal Air Force base in Cyprus, the sovereign British territory of Akrotiri, was hit by an Iranian drone, pulling Britain physically into the blast radius of this war. And Iran's foreign ministry issued a statement saying the Iranian military had lost control over several units, which were now operating on old, pre-programmed general instructions. That means elements of Iran's military are conducting strikes based on contingency orders set before the war began, not based on real-time command decisions. There may be no one on the Iranian side with the authority or capacity to stop certain attacks, even if they wanted to. The human cost as of this morning is devastating and still climbing. Inside Iran, at least 555 people have been confirmed killed across the country from U.S.-Israeli strikes. The single worst incident remains the strike on a girls' elementary school in Manab in southern Iran. Iranian state media confirmed the death toll at 148 children. In Israel, at least 10 are dead and 40 buildings in Tel Aviv have been damaged. 4 American service members have been killed. The most recent, a soldier who died Monday from injuries after an Iranian munition broke through air defenses and struck a fortified U.S. tactical operations center in Kuwait. Additionally, a monument to the Islamic Republic's founder, Ayatollah Khomeini, was toppled by a crowd in southern Iran. Iranians celebrating Khomeini's death poured into the streets in multiple cities, including Karaj, Shiraz, Kermanshah, and Isfahan, before security forces fired on some of them. Iran's internet blackout is still in place, so the full picture of what is happening inside the country remains largely invisible to the outside world. But what has escaped the blackout is extraordinary. The regime that killed thousands of protesters just weeks ago now has to decide whether to fight its own people while simultaneously fighting the United States and Israel from the air. Beyond China, the international reaction is fracturing global alliances in real time. Russia's Vladimir Putin publicly called Khamenei's killing a murder committed in cynical violation of all norms of human morality and international law. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned both the U.S.-Israeli strikes and Iran's retaliatory strikes, saying the use of force undermines international peace and security. France's Emmanuel Macron called for and must stop. The EU called the conflict greatly concerning and urged restraint, while quietly EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen backed a credible transition inside Iran. The Gulf states, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, all of which are being hit by Iranian missiles, issued a joint statement vowing to stand united in defense of our citizens, sovereignty, and territory. NATO raised its missile defense vigilance to protect member states if Iranian attacks expanded further. Turkey, a NATO member, called for an immediate ceasefire given its energy dependence on Iran. And Oman, the country that mediated the last round of indirect U.S.-Iran talks just weeks ago, warned the United States not to get sucked in further. The economic dimension of this conflict is already measurable and already alarming. U.S. crude oil rose more than 8% on Monday morning, jumping to $72.57 per barrel. The global benchmark Brent crude jumped approximately 9% to $79.41 before pulling back slightly. Gold and silver both climbed around 2% as investors fled to safe haven assets. The U.S. dollar strengthened. The 10-year Treasury yield fell to an 11-month low before partially recovering. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's daily oil supply passes, remains under severe threat. Iran has announced its formal closure. Every additional day of disruption translates directly into higher prices at petrol stations across Asia, Europe, and America. Goldman Sachs analysts said Monday that a prolonged disruption could push oil back toward $100 per barrel within weeks. So what does China's ceasefire call actually mean for where this war goes next? The answer requires understanding something important about what China is and what it can actually do. China is not just a diplomatic voice in this conflict. China is Iran's largest trading partner. China has a 25-year comprehensive strategic partnership agreement with Iran, signed just recently. China buys Iranian oil in direct defiance of American sanctions and has been doing so for years. China has provided Iran with technology, commercial ties, and diplomatic cover at the United Nations. If China wanted to exercise real leverage over Iran, over the IRGC unit still firing, over the factions competing for power in Tehran's current leadership vacuum, it has the relationships and the economic tools to attempt it. The critical question that no one in Washington, Moscow, or Beijing can answer today is whether China will choose to use that leverage to push for a genuine ceasefire, or whether China will sit back and allow the United States to exhaust itself in a Middle Eastern war while Beijing watches its geopolitical competitors bleed. The reporter who asked at today's briefing whether China and Russia discussed military support for Iran was asking the right question at the right moment, because that question sits at the precise boundary between this being a regional war and this becoming something the world has not experienced in 80 years. There are now 4 directions this conflict can move in the coming 72 hours. The first and most hopeful. China uses its genuine leverage with whatever remains of Iran's functional leadership to establish a back-channel ceasefire offer that gives both Washington and Tehran a face-saving exit. Trump has not closed the diplomatic door. He said as recently as Sunday that Iran's emerging new leadership had contacted him wanting to talk. If China can bridge that gap, a ceasefire within Trump's stated 4-week timeline remains theoretically possible. The second direction, the conflict grinds on for weeks as U.S. and Israeli strikes continue degrading Iran's military capacity, while Iran's IRGC fights an asymmetric, multi-front war across the Gulf and Lebanon simultaneously, exhausting both sides without producing a decisive outcome. The third direction, Hezbollah escalates dramatically, the Houthis resume Red Sea attacks, and the conflict pulls in Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq in a full regional war that no single power can contain. And the fourth direction, the one that China's statements today are specifically designed to prevent, is that Iran, cornered and leaderless, makes a request to Beijing or Moscow for military support, and one of those powers says yes. China's ceasefire call is not just a diplomatic formality, it is a signal. It is Beijing telling Washington, we are watching. We are engaged. We have tools and relationships you do not have, and we are deciding right now how to use them. Whether Washington listens, whether this war pauses for diplomacy or accelerates beyond the point of return, is the question that will define not just the next 4 weeks, but the next 4 decades of the global order. Day 3, the ceasefire call has been made. The bombs are still falling, and the world is waiting to see who blinks first. Stay subscribed. This is the story of our time, and we are watching every hour of it in real time.
Hours. And that silence alone nearly crashed 3 global markets. Iran announced it had fired advanced ballistic missiles, not at a military outpost, not at a border installation, not at some proxy staging ground in Syria. They claimed the strike was aimed directly at facilities linked to Israel's most senior leadership, the Prime Minister's compound. Within seconds, the internet fractured into competing narratives. Within minutes, trading algorithms began dumping assets. Within the hour, air defense systems across 4 countries were lighting up the night sky like a nervous system firing in every direction at once. And then came the part that no government, no military, no intelligence agency wanted. Total silence. No confirmation, no denial, no televised address, no verified image of Benjamin Netanyahu standing behind a podium proving he was breathing. Just hour after hour of nothing. And in modern warfare, nothing is not neutral. Nothing is a weapon. Iran said it used its K-bar-Shakan ballistic missiles. These are not garage-built rockets. These are precision-guided weapons designed to travel vast distances at speeds that compress decision-making into seconds. Once they leave the launcher, the math is already done. Impact is not a question of if, but where and when. If Iran's claim is even partially accurate, this was not a gesture. This was not theater. This was a nation telling another nation, and everyone watching, that leadership-level targeting is now on the table, written not in diplomatic cables, but in ballistic trajectories. And that changes the physics of this entire conflict. For years, Iran and Israel fought what analysts politely called a shadow war. It killed nuclear scientists in Tehran traffic, proxy battles across Syrian airspace and Lebanese hillsides, drone strikes attributed to no one and claimed by everyone. But through all of it, there was a line neither side publicly crossed. You do not aim at the head of state. You do not put a sitting prime minister or a supreme leader in the direct path of a warhead, because the moment you do, the conflict stops being strategic and becomes existential. And existential wars do not have off-ramps. They have escalation spirals that feed on themselves until something breaks that cannot be repaired. If Iran genuinely targeted Netanyahu's location, that line is not just crossed, it is erased. And what replaces it is a new reality, where every leader in the region wakes up each morning knowing that today might be the day a missile has their name on it. That is not a military development. That is a psychological transformation of the entire region. But the missile was only the first domino. Almost immediately, reports began flooding in from across the Persian Gulf. Drone activity over open water, interception attempts near energy facilities, missile alerts triggering in countries that were not even party to the conflict. Saudi Arabia's eastern province, home to the densest concentration of oil infrastructure on the planet, was suddenly under threat again. And the markets did not wait for a press conference. They did not wait for a Pentagon briefing or a State Department clarification. Oil futures surged before any government official had even reached a microphone. Because energy traders operate on a simple principle. They do not price reality. They price probability multiplied by consequence. And the probability of Gulf energy infrastructure being hit, multiplied by the consequence of losing even 5% of global oil supply, produces a number that makes traders move, they think. Nearly a fifth of all the oil consumed on Earth, the Strait of Hormuz. That is a choke point barely 30 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Every barrel that moves through it moves under the implicit assumption that no one will be stupid enough to shut it down. But assumptions are not defenses. And if missiles are flying toward prime ministers, the assumption that shipping lanes are sacred starts to feel dangerously optimistic. Now pull the camera back and look at who is watching. The United States has military installations scattered across the Gulf like chess pieces. Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait. Thousands of American service members living and working within range of the same missile systems that just allegedly targeted Israeli leadership. If a single Iranian drone or missile lands close enough to an American installation to produce casualties, the President of the United States faces a decision that will define not just a presidency, but possibly a generation. Respond with force and risk igniting a war that stretches from the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean. Hold back and watch every ally in the region quietly begin questioning whether American security guarantees are worth the paper they are printed on. And credibility, once lost in that part of the world, takes decades to rebuild. Ask the British. They are still recovering from Suez. China is calculating with a different kind of patience. Beijing depends on Gulf oil the way a patient depends on a ventilator. It can survive brief interruptions, but prolonged disruption is existential. Stability in the Gulf serves Chinese interests, but stability under exclusive American management does not. If this crisis causes Gulf states to question their dependence on Washington, Beijing does not need to fire a single shot. It simply needs to show up afterward with infrastructure deals, defense partnerships, and the quiet promise that China does not start wars in other people's neighborhoods. Opportunity does not always knock. Sometimes it just waits for someone else to break the door down. Russia watches from a different angle entirely. Every dollar added to the price of a barrel of oil is a dollar flowing into Moscow's war chest. Prolonged instability in the Gulf stretches Western attention, diverts military resources, and gives Putin breathing room in theaters where he needs it. Strategic distraction is not a side effect for Russia. It is a benefit. But none of these geopolitical calculations matter to the people whose lives are being rearranged in real time. Airlines are canceling flights across the entire region. Dubai and Riyadh and Doha are activating evacuation protocols that were written for exactly this scenario and hoped to never be used. Multinational companies are pulling non-recommending portfolio adjustments. This is how modern conflict propagates, not through advancing armies, but through collapsing confidence. It moves through algorithms and insurance tables and shipping manifests faster than any tank column ever could. Inside Israel, the pressure is compounding by the hour. Israel's entire security doctrine rests on a single psychological foundation: deterrence. The Iron Dome exists not just to intercept rockets, but to project an image of invulnerability. David's sling and the arrow system exist to ensure that no enemy believes it can reach Israeli soil with anything meaningful. If ballistic missiles penetrated that shield, even partially, even once, the damage is not measured in craters. It is measured in perception. Because the moment an adversary believes it can strike at the highest levels of Israeli leadership and survive the attempt, the entire deterrence architecture begins to wobble. And wobbling deterrence invites testing. And testing invites escalation. Israeli citizens are demanding answers. Iranian citizens are demanding their government prove the strike succeeded. Gulf populations are demanding to know why the defense systems their countries spent hundreds of billions acquiring did not prevent missiles from entering their airspace. And American voters, exhausted by 2 decades of Middle Eastern entanglement, are demanding that whatever happens next does not turn into another forever war. Every leader caught in this web is simultaneously managing a military crisis and a political survival problem. And the two do not always point in the same direction. Here is what makes this moment different from every previous flare-up in this region. Economic interdependence has turned military conflict into financial contagion. This is not 1973. Global supply chains are so deeply interwoven that a single refinery going offline in the Gulf can trigger inflation spikes in grocery stores in Ohio within a week. Stock exchanges have circuit breakers designed to halt trading when volatility exceeds thresholds. Those thresholds are being tested right now. Currency values in oil-importing nations are shifting. Central banks that just spent 2 years fighting inflation are watching energy prices climb and reaching for emergency playbooks they hoped were obsolete. War in the 21st century is not just kinetic, it is algorithmic. It moves through fiber optic cables and derivative contracts and cargo manifests. A missile that misses its target but closes a shipping lane can do more economic damage than one that hits a military base. Iran understands this. Iran has always understood this. And that understanding is precisely what makes this crisis so dangerous. Because Iran does not need to win a conventional war to achieve strategic victory. It needs to create enough disruption, enough doubt, enough economic pain, that the coalition arrayed against it begins to fracture under the weight of its own internal contradictions. Military planners think in escalation tiers. Tier 1 is rhetoric and limited strikes. Tier 2 is infrastructure targeting. Tier 3 is leadership targeting. Tier 4 is full regional war. If Iranian missiles were genuinely aimed at Netanyahu's compound, this conflict is already sitting at Tier 3. And the problem with Tier 3 is that stepping back down requires both sides to accept a form of restraint that looks like weakness to their domestic audiences. Iran cannot back down after claiming it struck at Israel's leader without appearing to have failed. Israel cannot absorb a leadership-level attack without responding in a way that reestablishes dominance. Both sides are trapped by their own narratives, and narratives in wartime are prisons with no visible doors. The next 72 hours will determine which of 4 possible futures materializes. The first is controlled de-escalation, measured strikes, symbolic responses, both governments claiming victory for domestic consumption while quietly agreeing to stop. This is the cleanest outcome and the least likely because politics on both sides rewards escalation. The second is a prolonged shadow conflict, cyber attacks, proxy rocket fire, covert operations, economic pressure maintained for months or years without formal war. This is the most historically consistent outcome for this region, but it bleeds economies slowly and shifts alliances gradually in ways that benefit China. The third is regional escalation. Israeli strikes deep inside Iran, triggering retaliation against American assets, drawing Washington into sustained combat operations, militarizing shipping lanes, oil spiking past levels that trigger global recession. Nobody wins this scenario in the short term, but the geopolitical map afterward looks nothing like the one before. The fourth is strategic realignment. Gulf states quietly diversifying their security partnerships away from exclusive American dependence, engaging Beijing and even Tehran through back channels, building a multipolar regional architecture that reduces everyone's vulnerability to a single patron's decisions.